Recently, a parent shared a story with me, sort of half laughing and half tired. She explained that it was bedtime. She turned off the TV after watching a little TV in the summertime, not a normal practice for during the week. And her 5-year-old daughter shouted, "I hate you." And the mother smiled and said, "Well, we went upstairs and we sang the Shema and we got her to sleep. And then I went downstairs and I made her lunch for camp the next day." And the story, it sort of stayed with me, not because it was dramatic, because for those who have been a parent, it was real. Parenting sometimes means holding the boundary and still showing up with love. It means seeing past the outburst and responding not with punishment, but with presence and also a packed lunch. And that story isn't just about parenting, it's about this week's Torah portion, Parashat Balak. You'll see how I get to there. Balak, the king of Moab, sees the Israelites camped nearby, and they haven't attacked, and they haven't crossed the border. They're simply there. And still, he panics. He doesn't ask who they are. He doesn't ask what they want. He doesn't pause to consider that they might not be a threat to him. But he reacts. He hires Balaam, the prophet for hire, and asks him to curse the Israelites into submission. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks taught that the most dangerous use of speech isn't lying. He says it's flattening. It's when language turns people into symbols. When language turns people into a single distorted story. And that's what Balak does. He doesn't see the Israelites. He sees a projection of his own fear. And we know how that works. Because we live in a world where Jews are often spoken about, or more than they're even spoken with. Treated less like a people and more like metaphors. Sometimes this shows up in conversations about Israel, sometimes in assumptions about wealth and identity or influence. Sometimes in silence when naming anti-Semitism feels too risky or somehow too political. Fear doesn't always look like retreat. Sometimes it arrives as an explosion, an angry message, a harsh accusation, an assumption of the absolute worst. It speaks in absolutes. It levels people. It leaves no room for understanding or growth. And when it does, it stops being a challenge and becomes a curse. Not a curse in the mystical sense, but a curse in the deeply human sense. A curse that says, "You've failed me completely. You were never trustworthy to begin with. The mistake is proof of who you really are." That kind of curse masquerades as honesty, but it's also disguised as righteousness. It doesn't ask, what happened? It doesn't wonder what else might be true. It offers no generosity, no curiosity, no sense that people are more than a moment or a decision. And when we let fear drive us to curse, we become blind to the potential of blessing. We forget that people are whole stories, not headlines. We forget that leaders and communities are made of real people who try and fail sometimes and fall short sometimes and maybe have more to the story than you understand and still show up the next day. And I want to suggest that there's also a different way, a loving challenge that looks a little different. It says, "I'm disappointed, but I still care. I really want things to be better, and I believe they can be, and I'm naming what's hard for me because I want us to grow together." That's not avoiding truth. It means delivering truth without cutting people down. It doesn't mean ignoring failure. It means holding people accountable without stripping away their dignity. Loving challenge asks, can I stay in relationship with someone even when I'm hurt and disappointed? Can I hold someone to a high standard without assuming bad intent? Can I name what's broken for me while believing in what's possible for we? And that's what the parent did. She corrected an angry outburst of a 5-year-old who had too much screen time, most likely. And she stayed, and she loved, and she challenged. She held a boundary, and she refused to curse. And that is strength of the best kind of parenting. And when we live that way with others, we may realize that anyone can curse. Anyone can do it. But to bless, to challenge with love, to stay in relationship when walking away or cursing could just be so much easier, that takes maturity. That takes courage. And I want to suggest that in the moment that we are living in right now, that maturity and courage is actually what we desperately need. Which brings us back to Balaam. Balaam is not a righteous person. He's not brave. He's a man who is hired to do harm with his words. And he sets out to curse people he's never even met. But he's stopped by a donkey. 3 times she veers from the road. 3 times he strikes her. Only then does God open her mouth and his eyes. A talking donkey. It's a great story. And the prophet doesn't see the angel. The donkey does. The one who is meant to lead is actually blind. The one who is dismissed as irrational and just a beast is the one who sees clearly. Sometimes the holiest resistance comes not from certainty, but from refusing to move forward into a lie. Sometimes it takes a donkey to stop the machinery of a curse. And that is when Balaam blesses. Not because the Israelites were perfect, they weren't. Not because he admires them, he didn't. He blesses because something shifts. The spell of fear breaks. He stops seeing the Israelites as a threat, and he sees them as a people fleeing for their safety. And the curse, it becomes a blessing. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. The blessing has lived long past the prophet Balaam. It has lived in our liturgy. It reminds us that the most important words we say are often the ones we never expect to speak. My teacher, Rabbi Michael Marmer, calls moments like this the 23rd letter. Now that may seem strange because we have more letters in the English alphabet, but it's a letter beyond the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And he explains that a symbol for the future we haven't written is that 23rd letter. It's a blessing not yet shaped. And the 23rd letter is what we reach for when the usual words fall short, when we stand between fear and clarity, between curse and blessing, between what is and what might still be. It isn't about having answers. It's about how we show up when the answers aren't clear. It's about staying fully human when the world urges us to flatten, to condemn, to curse, or to walk away. It's about choosing to bless even when everything says to curse. And maybe that's what the mother was writing into the world when she sang the Shema and she made her daughter's lunch. Because she loved her child more than she feared her child's anger. The Shema and that nighttime hug and the kiss and the packed lunch were her unfinished sentence, her 23rd letter. And maybe that's what we're being called to write too. To bless when it's hard. To hold fear without letting it take control of us. To choose curiosity over assumption. To ask what else might be true. To remember Rabbi Sachs's warning that the most dangerous speech reduces people to a single, distorted story that confirms our angers and our fears. And to live in the space between certainty and mystery. And to still choose courage. To still choose compassion. To still choose truth. Because what matters most is found on the other side of fear. And we're still writing it. With our choices, with our relationships, with our steadiness and our tenderness, and yes, sometimes with sliced apples, a peanut butter sandwich, some goldfish, and carrots, packed quietly for someone who said something harsh, whom is growing, and whom we choose to love deeply. Shabbat Shalom.